One thinks often of the old Spanish proverb which says, there is no home in all the land which will not sooner or later have its hush. If the hush hasn't come to your house, mark it, well, it will. It's come to some of our houses again and again. No home is there in all the land which will not sooner or later have its hush. Now, whatever the situation of duty, of peril, of responsibility, of tears, of ordeals, strangely trying, whatever the situation in life, Christ calls to us, do not be afraid. I'm right at your elbow. I'm nearer than your own breathing. I'm nearer than your hands or feet. Cast your burden upon me and leave it with me. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. Oh, if man would try Christ's way. Men ask me up and down America as I go to and fro, sir, do not the world conditions now on prove that your Christianity has failed? And I said it gives the abundant and overwhelming proof that everything on earth has failed except Christianity. Sadly, egregiously, horribly failed. Big business has failed. It used to boast that it could sit behind closed doors and press buttons and stop war. And lo, when the dogs of war were so minded, they crawled out of their terrible lair. And you see what they've done to the world and are doing to it now. And then the statesmen said, we know how to press buttons and stop war. And lo, with all the statesmen and politicians of all the countries of the world talking about it, war rages on. And then secular education said, we know how to stop war. And war now sweeps countries educated to the nth degree in secular education. And science, with its boasted triumph, said, we know how to stop it. And lo, science is prostrate before the dreadful car of war. Christ stands in the marketplace of life and says, oh, ye burdened, busy, oppressed men and women, try me. Take my road. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. Come unto me and yield yourselves to me, and I'll manage you and your problems all. Don't be afraid of life. And he says the second word, do not be afraid of death. And is the fear of death real? Poignantly so. With many people, a preacher finds that out alongside of the physician, that the fear of death with many people is acutely real. Acutely real. If you've read that strange genius, Metterlink, in his autobiography, one of the strangest sort of things put to print, if you've read it, he confesses there that in the presence of death he was ever as a little frightened child. Clever, cultivated man that he was, he confesses in the presence of death, I tremble as a frightened child. The Bible tells us here that some people are all their lifetime subject to bondage through fear of death. For one thing, death is a bourne whence no traveler comes back to tell us what he found. Strange, strange land, these men and women of ours, they've left us, but they haven't come back to tell us what they found. One has an explanation why in recent years, with the world overwhelmed by war and deaths many and sufferings poignant, one can understand why some people turn to the secrets of death and try to probe into it and have death and the dead talk back to them. What shall I say to you about that? All the purported revelations that come back from your table rappings and your purported conversations with the dead, all the purported revelations that we've heard anything about are profitless. If you had 1,000,000 of them, they wouldn't do you good for 1 second. But the main word remains to be said. Christ has told us all we need to know about death and his word is to the last degree dependable and sure. He has been in the grave himself and been there 3 days, and then he came back as he said he would come back, and pushed the gates of the grave ajar, and came out of that grave with the keys of death and the grave swinging at his girdle. And he tells us, you put your trust in me, and you need to have one sigh of fear about your death. Mine it is to take care of all who trust me. Because I live, ye also shall live. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, though he shall die, yet shall he live. And he that liveth and believeth in me shall never die. And then Christ goes on and tells us more. I'll be with my friends when they come to die, whether they know about it or not, whether they're conscious or not. I'll be with my friends, every one of them, when they come to die, so that they may sing triumphantly, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I'll be with my people, Christ pledges us, when we come to die. And some of us in our ministries among the people have seen that promise verified times without count. I have. As an humble minister in this goodly city, now 40-odd years, I've seen the pledge of Christ that he'd be with his friends when they came to enter upon this passage known as death and cross the sea, separating between time and eternity. I've seen times without count his promise verified, his conscious presence with his people. Great old John Wesley, one of Earth's greatest Christians and greatest Christian leaders, great old John Wesley said, our people die well. Wasn't it glorious for a religious leader to be able to say that about the people that he was leading? Now some of us in our little small spheres, in our little humble spheres compared with the world sphere of John Wesley, some of us can take up his words and say the same thing. Our people die well. I come back to my pulpit week after week, brave as a lion, to preach Christ to the people when I see how they can go down into the valley of the shadow of death, joyful, unafraid, and triumphant. Time and time again have I seen that. Some time ago I was asked, when I'd finished my morning sermon, go at once with us. One of your men is at death's door and is asking for you. And I heard it, of course, before going to my home. And there he was, and he said, I wanted to hear you one time more read the Bible, and one time more to pray. And he said, I'm going in a little while. Why, I said, I hope you'll be better in the morning, dear friend. And he smiled sweetly and said, I'll be well in the morning. I'll be in the house of life above in the morning. He said, I have the sentence of death, but I'm not afraid. I want you to read for me once more and pray. I'd led this fine young fellow to Christ. I'd buried him with Christ in solemn baptism. I had stood before him and the lovely girl that he married and said the words that made them one in the hour of marriage. I had seen their family grow around them. I read the scriptures and then again bowed and prayed that he who was going and the wife and sons who were staying would accept the will of God, because his will is always right and safe and best. When I'd got through, he said to his wife, Wife, did you hear the preacher's sermon? His prayer? Did you hear him pray that we might accept God's will? I do accept it, said he. I do accept it. Without a murmur or protest, his will is always right. Tell me, wife, do you accept it? And she bent over his dying frame and kissed him and said, Yes, I accept the will of God. And he said, Hurry, boys, hurry, Papa's going. Do you accept the will of God? And they gathered around him and kissed his hands as they knelt about his couch on which he lay dying. And they sobbed out their protestations, Yes, Daddy, we accept God's will. And then the big man was gone. Oh, the strange sweetness, the hallowed quietness, the marvelous peace that filled that room. He was gone. And she spoke first. The wife said, The Lord's in this place. And the boys spoke up, 16 and 18 and 20, and they said, Yes, Daddy is gone, but the Lord is here with us.